So what does our 2025 look like?
Well, ladies, 2025 is so intense. Neither good nor bad. There's a lot of new chapters that are beginning.
Now we know 2025 will not be boring. Aliens take over.
I think that there's so many misconceptions around astrology and what it can do and how we can work with it and how we can utilize it. So cute.
We're all actively dying in this room right
yes,
now.
Yes, we are. We're decaying.
Yay.
What is up?
Welcome back. Hello.
Is this Two Girls, One Ghost?
Two Girls, One Ghost.
But it's not just Two Girls, One Ghost?
You're right. It's not.
No.
It's Two Girls, One Ghost and Aliza Kelly.
From Horoscope Weekly.
We are your ghostesses. That is Corinne.
Hello.
I am Sabrina. And we're really excited for the episode you're about to listen to. It is our December collab, our Haunted With. And this month we spoke to Aliza Kelly of Horoscope Weekly and the author of It's All Magic, which is out despite our confusion in the beginning of this. My confusion, my date dyslexia that I had. We don't find out necessarily why our brains are so messed up, but we do find out a lot about ourselves.
And what's to come in 2025.
Which sounds a little bit chaotic.
So if you're curious to hear maybe a little bit about our readings or just the general reading for everyone for 2025, Aliza comes to bring her expertise. She has been practicing, astrology and various forms of witchcraft for a very long time. She's extremely talented, very well versed. And she gave us her talents. So let us borrow them.
She gave them to us.
Yeah, we stole them. We sat there and we were like, whoa. But she helped us out in terms of figuring out what next year has to bring us. And you.
And you.
The world.
So we hope you enjoy this. Check out Aliza Kelly and Horoscope Weekly wherever you listen to podcasts. Check out her book, It's All Magic. And let us know what you think 2025 is looking like for you and how you feel about 2025 because it's literally right around the corner.
Yeah, I'm feeling better than 2024. Let's say that.
Yeah. Well, looking on the up and up, hopefully. Positivity. Enjoy.
Well, thank you so much for coming.
Yes, Aliza Kelly of Horoscopes Weekly.
Yes.
And so many other things.
We have your new book.
It's All Magic.
Thank you.
When does it come out?
It comes out October 22nd.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so it's already out.
So it's out.
No, this is December. Oh, wait, yes. So yes.
So the book is already out.
My brain just went.
I was like, do I not know months?
No, I just had brain dyslexia. I don't know. Yes, it's already out.
It's already out. Things are going well. Maybe you'll tell us why we are the way we are. So.
Yeah, what is wrong with us? Not a therapist, but kind of there is therapy with.
It's very therapeutic.
It is very
therapeutic.
How did you get into reading charts and horoscopes?
Astrology and
I'll try to do the short, long version for you.
Okay.
I mean, really rolling back the tape, I think the writing was always on the wall. As I'm sure you both relate, I was 100% like that girl who would come to the slumber party with the Ouija boards and like the spooky. Yeah. And my earliest memories of being a kid are ones that were very magical, where I did feel really, really magical and very much connected to different dimensions and different realms. So astrology is not like that outside of that wheelhouse, know?
Wait, so did you see dead people?
I thought that I was dead, actually.
Oh, so very Lydia of you.
Yeah, it was. I remember looking in the mirror as a little kid and I was really pale and my skin would like glow in the dark. And I remember looking in the mirror and being like, this is a ghost. And it was me. So it is kind of interesting thinking about reincarnation and children being so connected to recognizing their consciousness.
Yeah.
And I definitely had that type of experience. I mean, these are earliest memories. This is like 3-4 years old.
Yeah.
I remember that.
It makes me wonder if you were connecting to a past life in any way too, where your past life was like, I don't recognize this child in front of me because the soul I connect to or the physical being I connect to has died.
Yes. I mean, that is kind of how it felt.
Yeah.
And I also now know that that is a stage of consciousness, right? That is coming into your maturation and recognizing that you are in your body. But for me, and I'm sure for a lot of people, it did feel very mystical. You know, it felt like a very mystical experience to look in the mirror and be like, this is me.
We are one.
Yeah, we are the same. And like this body kind of,
your weird little
ghost.
meat suit.
Yes,
You're like,
yes.
oh, that's weird that I'm wearing this.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was like definitely a haunted Victorian child.
I love
like
that so much.
Super, super. But then as time went on and, you know, I went through high school and I went through college, that wasn't something I was like wearing on my sleeve. It wasn't like the biggest attribute as to who I was.
Yeah.
But graduating college, I then found myself living in Los Angeles. And like many people in Los Angeles, I found myself very sort of like, who am I? what do I want to do with my life?
We met in LA.
We met in LA.
We went to college out there.
Yeah.
We also were like, who am I? And went to LA.
Yeah. Yep.
We thought we were actors.
Turns
out we're podcasters.
Yeah, I mean, you weren't totally wrong, right? Like you were in entertainment somehow.
Yeah,
sure,
it just you found a better space for you. Where
Exactly.
you integrate all of the things.
Yes.
Yeah.
But LA is the perfect place to go, even if you're a little weird and woo-woo, because there's so much out there to figure out.
Yes.
And introduce yourself to like a huge group of people.
Though I would say that, you know, mysticism in LA feels very different than East Coast.
Yes.
That's true.
Magic. And I was like a New York City witch. LA witches are a little different. Neither good nor
Completely
bad
agree.
different. It's a different kind of vibe.
There
It
is
totally is.
something about, I mean, I just recently moved back to the East Coast after being in LA for 13 years. So there is a completely night and day in terms of energy. I feel like the East Coast is rooted to something more historical.
Yeah, it does feel that way. I feel like in LA, it does feel a little bit more like kombucha, yoga instructor.
New age.
There's a
Very
new age, right? And
Yeah.
like that's also really interesting too, especially for witches who are very interested in like UFOs and aliens and like those different types of dimensions.
Yeah.
And I do think that having like Joshua Tree out there and having these different vortexes of energy is really mystical and esoteric as well, but it's a little less haunted. It feels more like it's, you know, astral messages from another planet or another dimension than in the East Coast where it's like, oh no, it's just ghosts. It's just like
calling
ghosts,
upon your
ghosts and ghosts.
ancestors and a bunch of dead people.
Though LA is also a very haunted city. So like that also can't be discredited. It's a
100%.
very, very haunted city.
Yeah.
I mean, everything is haunted when you know where to look.
Yes, truly. This house is haunted everywhere.
Of course.
Do you feel like the place that you live in now is haunted? Have you experienced anything?
We actually live in a 200-year-old house, and it does not feel that haunted, which is really wild.
Maybe just good vibes all around from everyone who's ever lived there?
I think that the energy there is very happy for us to be there and to be occupying it. I did a full house search, all the deeds as far back as I could go. And, you know, I see that people have died in the house. It's not like, I mean, a 200-year-old house, of course, you're going to have people die in it.
Right.
But I've lived in much more haunted environments, you know, like
That's great.
And it's really nice. I will say that the only thing that is notable is that Luke, my husband, and I will often hear the other person calling our name. And
that started since giving birth here.
Interesting.
Yeah.
It was going on before we had our daughter. It was going on really as soon as we moved into the house. That, and like often it'll be like a very aggressive calling. So then I'll hear Luke be like, "What?" And I'm like, "What? Like what's up?
I didn't say anything.
You good?" Yeah. And he's like, "You were calling my name."
Wow.
Yeah.
Ooh, and it goes both ways too.
Yes,
so you hear him.
Yes. But I would say that like as we've talked about it, it seems more like it's kind of a prank. And it seems more playful, and it seems like whatever spirits are there are trying to like bring us together and get us to interact, and it's kind of cute.
That is cute.
Yeah.
I like that.
You're their entertainment.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
They're sitting back and observing.
Yeah, they're
you.
like, I could mimic this voice.
Yeah.
I could do a little thing.
Right. I love
They're having
that.
a good time.
But okay, so you were saying you lived in LA for a little bit.
So I lived in LA. It was in LA that I realized that I really had a lot of inner work to do on myself, and that I really didn't know who I was. And in tandem with starting therapy, I also started to look at my astrological profile, and it really clicked for me.
Yeah.
It was sort of instantaneous, where it was as soon as there was this map, this guidance as to who I was, into the dimensionality of that, into the complexities of that, I finally had permission to be this complex, multidimensional person, which I don't think I had been really offering or allowing myself to possess before.
How old were you?
23.
Okay.
Yeah. And also at that time, a really good friend of mine, my best friend from college, and I decided, we both started looking at astrology more seriously. We were both single. And at this time, like going back to 2013, 2014, Tinder really had just been introduced. Bumble hadn't even come out yet. So it was really just Tinder. And we were like, this kind of sucks. What if we started an astrology dating app? So from 2013 to 2016, we ran an astrology dating app called Align. And we were very much—
This is so cool.
I know.
It is cool now looking back.
Yeah.
At the time, it was cool at the time too, but it was a really challenging experience because we were ahead of the curve on it. We would not be taken seriously by anyone. We received emails from investors who apparently, invested in female entrepreneurs who were like, you are a joke. Astrology isn't real. And it was a really— Yeah,
why
the amount of effort.
Spend the
effort,
energy to
the
even
effort.
send the email.
Totally.
Ew.
Someone even said, like, usually I would wish women like you well, but I can't even do that in this case. Astrology is not viable. Astrology is not a cultural movement. Astrology is not mainstream. And it's like, now here we are. Astrology is like
so mainstream.
Not to flex, but it's like doing well. Yes.
Hello? Oh, it was the book.
But the book said hello.
The book.
The book. I just turned around and like saw the plant waving.
Right.
Like, what the hell?
You were having like a little shop of horror moment.
Jeez, that is awful.
Yeah, it was. It was really challenging. How do I put it? Like it was a really taxing experience.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Because we believed in it. We knew that there was something tangible. We knew that it was something that was really going to be major.
Yeah.
Because we saw the potential of it, and we were just being told no, no, no. 2 months after we closed Align, CoStar came out. CoStar pitched the same investors, got funding.
What?
So like the timing of all of this was wild. So then I was broke. I had no idea what I was going to do with my life yet again. I moved back to New York, where I'm from. And in that moment, my mentor through all of this, an amazing astrologer named Annabelle Gatt, was like, don't give up on astrology. And at that moment, I had felt very betrayed by it. I felt like this practice had done nothing, and it had only led me into a worse situation than I was in when I had started that journey.
Right.
And she said, like, don't give up. And she so graciously invited me into her house, literally into her classes, into like a full-blown immersive mentorship with her. And in that time, I took everything that I had been learning in those 3 years and really honed it and became a real practitioner through that. And very quickly, everything started to connect. And I was
Can
still
I just pause for a second and say how amazing it is that you actually, like, the universe is showing you the signs of the path that you should take, and you're taking it. A lot of people don't take it.
Yeah.
Because it's
I
easier
know.
sometimes to not.
Yeah. And I think that it's also easy to have the ego get so bruised and wounded as it was in my case.
Well, especially when people are going out of their way to say shitty things to you.
Yes.
Yeah.
That you are sort of misdirecting where the wound is, what the source of the wound is. Like the source of the wound was not astrology. It was the fact that guys are sexist, misogynistic assholes.
And wouldn't see the potential
and wouldn't
of something
take
great.
2 young women seriously in their pursuit of something that men by and large hate. Right? Because guys still don't like astrology, broadly speaking.
Right.
You know, we still have a lot of work to do on the cis het men population.
You just know that those guys went on a date with some woman who was like, ooh, so-and-so horoscope is showing. Or like something where it was like, oh, I can't date you. We're not.
I mean, I feel like that's the rumor that guys would often say.
Yeah.
I remember guys when I was dating would be like, oh, I'm a Cancer. Does that mean you don't want to date me? And I'm like, no, that statement is why I don't want to date you. Like, it has nothing to do with your zodiac sign, honey. It's like everything else is the problem.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, this idea of like women deciding whether or not they want to continue to see someone solely based on their zodiac sign. Like, I've truly never met someone who does that. Like, that would be a really bad application of astrology.
Well, and also it's so much more than just your main sign.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like I relate more to everything in like together rather than just being a Virgo.
It's exactly why you can't open up a Cosmo magazine and read like, oh, what's the horoscope for Leo? And it doesn't always hit.
The chances of it relating to every single person who's a Leo isn't always going to work.
Yes. I think that there's so many misconceptions around astrology and what it can do and how we can work with it and how we can utilize it. And certainly men who don't understand it, who have never taken the time to understand it, are not qualified to have a debate on astrology.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
Interesting statement that could be applied to a lot of different topics.
Yes.
Truly.
I wonder what you're talking about.
Yeah. What could it be? And that basically brings us to today. It was through that journey, through lots and lots of different death and rebirth cycles, that I found myself in the place where I am now, which is now 35, having done astrology for my entire 20s and into half of my 30s, which is nuts. And if someone in college would have told me that this is going to be what my journey and what my career was going to be, I would have been like, I don't know about that. Like, does that even make sense?
Right.
But it does. And it's amazing. And I'm so grateful. And I feel so in alignment with myself and with what I'm supposed to be doing and what I'm good at and all of the things.
Yeah.
I have been thinking a lot about like what a successful journey looks like, because I am coming up on, well, it's been over 10 years of exploring this material, but even in my current business and the current operation, it's been 8 years. And I've been thinking a lot about how much, I do tend to focus on the successes rather than the failures. And there are a lot of failures and maybe even more failures than there are successes.
But the failures are just as important,
right?
Yes.
Yeah. And I don't get hung up on them.
Yeah.
And I do think that that might be a distinguishing variable, because I do think that there also is a conviction of someone who's like, well, I'm not meant to do this because look at all these things that didn't work out.
Right.
But if you're someone who just hyper focuses and fixates on the things that do work out, then you might have the longevity to keep going.
Right.
Well, when we lived in LA and we're in the acting world, there was something that was said by an acting coach, which I felt like I've kept with me for a long time. And it's, you collect all your no's to get your one yes. So you need to collect your 10 no's or your 20 no's to get your one yes. I almost like every time I encounter an obstacle, I'm like, oh, another no in the bag. I'm that much closer to the yes.
Oh, I love that. That's nice.
You're getting closer.
Yeah.
I feel like you appreciate the success more when you've had failures.
Yes. And I also think that people can understand and see you as a full person. I mean, this is why like Nepo babies can be so insufferable, because it's like you've never been told no
like,
once.
it's
like the stories are more interesting when they're sort of checkered with lots of different ups and downs. And even though it's really hard to navigate them when you're on the ride, on the other side of it, you're like, actually, that was worth it. I have so much more perspective. I really can relish this good thing more than I could have if it was just came so easily.
Well, that reminds me a lot of a Saturn return.
Yes.
Which I actually learned about from, I had done trauma treatment, and one of my therapists like looked at me, first session with her, and she goes, oh, you're going through your Saturn return. And it was the first time I had heard about it. And I was like, what is that? And I looked it up. Granted, I thought I had started going through it because what brought me to trauma treatment, but it was like, oh, I'm just beginning it. And it was horrible for me. Some people, it's great. But then now on the other side of it, I'm like, I've learned so much about myself, and it is a rebirth. And rebirth isn't always easy, but I've taken so much positive from it.
Yes, yes. And during a Saturn return, we are going through this maturation process where we are becoming our adult selves, and that is independent from all of the pressures of society.
Right.
So we have to separate ourselves from our parents, from partners, from career identity, from all of the things that we think that we knew.
Right.
So that we can find authenticity and we actually can learn how to take care of ourselves and become our own daddy.
Yeah.
Saturn
literally,
is daddy.
Yeah.
So it's like, how do you become daddy?
Well, you know
right?
what's so funny is I remember I didn't even know Saturn was daddy, but I've been calling myself daddy in the last year. When you told me you were pregnant and you were holding a mom mug, I was like, I really want a dad mug because I'm daddy.
I feel like you've also been calling yourself my baby a lot too.
Yeah, I can be both. I shed my parents. Now you're my new mom.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah. So you went through your Saturn return. It was the end of 2022, first half of 2023.
Yeah, exactly.
Was your Saturn return.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that crazy that specifically lines up?
Yeah, that's exactly
with what you were going through.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because your Saturn is in an area of your chart, the 12th house, where it's very psychological. There's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of sort of like layer shedding.
Yeah.
And also figuring out like who's on your team and who's not on your team.
Absolutely.
A big part of the Saturn return story. I actually, as I have your charts printed out, I was just noting some things. And one of the things that I did notice in both of your charts actually was Saturn. Because of the way that your charts are configured, you both have very significant Saturn transits going on right now. For you, Sabrina, because you're a Pisces rising, 20 degrees Pisces rising, Saturn is currently at 20 degrees of Pisces. It's on and around that degree right now.
So does that like symbolize a continuation of some aspect of that, or what does that?
I would say yes.
Yeah.
And it's going to end soon. Because as soon as Saturn moves from your 12th house into your first house, we call this crossing the ascendant. When a planet crosses the ascendant, it's a really big deal because it takes something that has been sort of it's almost like the gestation period of it. It's very internal. We're thinking about it. We're reflecting on it. We're trying to figure out how to bring it into to actually, manifest the energy of it.
This is like I was crying before we recorded and I didn't tell her anything.
I was just in my face. I was like, don't do too much to tell anything that's going on with Sabrina for the camera's sake.
But that I've truly been like frustrated in the last couple of months because I've been like, I thought I went through my Saturn return already. Like I'm so self-aware, especially psychologically, and I've done so much work on myself and in learning and knowing who I am and want to be and the life I want to live. But there have been things where I just feel like I haven't been able to just like do that final effort
connect
to
the
get
action
there.
to your
So I like to hear that it's coming soon. Do you know when?
What's the date and time?
I'll get the date for you. I will get the date and time for you. But it's very soon.
I'll be outside waiting.
Yeah.
I'll be at the support.
Balloons.
Yeah.
I love that.
See, this is why I'm your baby.
Every daddy needs to be a baby.
Exactly.
Every daddy is just a baby in disguise.
I want that on a shirt. Every daddy needs to be a baby too.
It's true. It's a fine line between baby and daddy.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a really powerful, transformative time. And you're going to really feel the difference between Saturn having been embodied in your 12th house for so long. We're talking since 2021.
That literally is like truly.
So it was 2021 and then it was your Saturn return and all of that was sort of wrapped up together. And now, Saturn moved into Pisces out of Aquarius, which is where your Saturn is last year. But it's still been in this area where it's like you're integrating it and you're figuring out how to like shed and you're figuring out what life is going to look like. And it's still emotional and there's still a lot of there's still a lot of carnage,
Yeah.
And when Saturn finally gets into your first house, it's just going to feel so much more accessible.
Wow.
You're going to be able to actually use it and work with it. And it's going to feel like it's a tool rather than it is just another bag that you're carrying around.
Wow. This is amazing. I feel like we naturally progressed into like the reading of charts and stuff. But for everyone who's listening, and as context for you, every year in our December, like our last episode before January, we read our charts
horoscopes
and horoscopes for the year ahead I mean, they're not very legit. They're just, we Google it.
Just AI.
Basically.
Just AI for us.
We're like, whatever horoscope comes up when we first Google
17
it.
magazine.
Yeah.
What's in store?
It literally might be ones I wrote. So
honestly, we should go back and look.
Yeah.
But we're like, this is an even better, more advanced way to do it, where we actually have someone who's professional and educated in astrology to come help us look at our year ahead.
Well, and our specific charts, not just our...
Yeah, not just our suns.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I do think that horoscopes are really amazing. Obviously, I wouldn't have a show about horoscopes if I didn't.
Yeah.
But what they offer is a perspective. They offer a really powerful perspective into whatever that duration of the horoscope is. Your year ahead, your week, your month, your day. And it gives you permission to sort of look for things that you may have overlooked otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
So that is really the value and the merit to horoscopes, is that it shifts your perspective in such a way where you can actually start to be accountable to your experiences.
Yeah.
And because time, if you're not, I mean, one of the amazing things about astrology is how much it reveres time. I'm a Capricorn rising, so I'm obsessed with time. A lot of astrologers are Capricorn risings because we are Saturn. You know, we are watching all of the hands of the clock move, and we're thinking about what came before and where we are now and what's coming up ahead. And astrology really gives us permission to do that. It lets us recognize that we don't have to waste a day. We don't have to waste a week. We don't have to waste a month. If we tune in and find presence in that, we can actually really be participatory in our life and in our experience in a way that I don't think it's always easy to do so otherwise, because life is happening, you know?
Yeah.
And with astrology, it's not just happening. We are engaged with it.
Right.
And that's really special to me.
So how often are you like looking up your own birth chart and looking at how things are playing out for you currently or in the future?
Well, I have sort of a sense of what's going on always. And I have a sense of how things are affecting my chart.
Yeah.
Sort of just broadly always.
Right.
But I also still get surprised.
Yeah.
You know, like when my daughter, who's now 10 months old, started to have her food intolerance, I was like, what's going on in my chart? And I looked, and Saturn was right on my moon to the exact degree. And I knew Saturn was in Pisces. I knew that I was going to have a moon-Saturn conjunction. The moon represents your relationship with your mom, your mothering, all of these like mother concepts. Saturn, of course, is like responsibilities, and it's daddy.
So is Saturn mommy and daddy?
Saturn
feels
is
like it has
daddy,
both.
but who is like daddy is a concept, you know?
Yeah.
Daddy isn't just like your parent who had the penis. Like
it's an energy.
It's an energy.
Yeah.
So a mom can also be a dad.
Daddy.
Right. That's why I call myself daddy.
Yeah.
I don't have a penis.
Yeah, I mean, it was to the day, and it was like, oh yeah, here is a new relationship that I need to form with motherhood.
Wow.
And this is the relationship that I need to be willing to show up for.
Right.
I can't, with a Saturn transit, like you can't gloss over it. And my moon in Pisces loves to, you know, if I can escape something, I surely will. I will find a way out.
Float on by.
Yeah, I will float on by.
Love to do that. Yeah.
If possible, to be evasive. Yes.
Right.
Please.
Someone else deal with this or no one deal with it.
Yeah.
'Cause
Yes,
I'm not.
yes.
But then when you're a parent, it's impossible
Yes.
too.
And that
Yeah.
was one of those amazing astrology transits.
That's cool.
I also had something that I talk about a lot, which I think is important to mention as much as possible, is the sort of transit tripping, I call it, but it's sort of projecting your own anxiety onto astrology and being like, oh no, I was told that this is coming and this is going to be bad, and then sort of waiting for the other shoe to drop.
So like a Saturn return, if someone figures out when it's going to happen.
Yes, and then they're like, oh no,
anticipating it.
oh no. But the thing is that when it comes to making predictions, a good astrologer is not going to say, this is how it is going to manifest.
Right.
A good astrologer is going to sort of offer, first of all, a host of different ways that something can, as many ideas as they could possibly muster as to how something is going to show up in our life.
Right.
And still, we're going to be surprised.
Right.
Because we have free will, we have agency. I think there's a major difference between people who are working with astrology and people who are just waiting for astrology to happen to them.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're just waiting for astrology to happen to you, like a lot is going to pass you by, you
Yeah.
know, because you're not participating.
Yeah.
But if you are participating in it, you can start to see that even things that seem challenging are actually incredible blessings.
Yes.
I had a transit that was happening a few years ago where I was really concerned about it. It was Uranus going on to my IC into my 4th house. And sort of the anxiety projection of that is like, everyone that I love is going to die. You know, like everyone that I love, all of my maternal figures, like everything is going to be uprooted. And what ended up happening is Luke and I got our place out of the city because it had to do with a big change in our foundation. But my anxious mind couldn't even think of what a great manifestation of that would be. And after that experience, I really came to realize and embody the fact that, astrology is always filled with surprises.
Yeah.
Especially with a planet like Uranus, which is the planet of surprise, but it is always filled with surprises. And it's cool
and to your point, you might read something and expect it to be something negative, but then in this case, it's not.
Yes.
And there's so many versions of it that doesn't have to be.
And, psychic readings or things like that, where a tarot card might, like the death card, might seem like there's a negative connotation to it, or doom or death.
Death.
Literally, or death. But it often isn't that straightforward or that on the
because you
nose.
only die once. Right? But the chances are
in this life.
Well,
depends on what you
girls. You know what I mean.
Yes.
In this body.
Yes.
So with that, we have how many times we're going to pull the death card in a lifetime? Probably more times than we die, you know? So it can't, every time we pull it, it's not going to be death.
Right.
It can't be. Or it is a death, but it's not a bodily, physical death.
And
it's a different
itself.
kind. Yes. So I want to also share with you the Saturn relationships that you have.
Oh, amazing.
So this is one of the things that I really was noticing in your charts. As we were talking about, Saturn is crossing your ascendant, and that is going to be happening right now. Really, it's imminent. This is taking place. And then in your chart, Saturn is in the 10th house, which is the area that's connected with career and legacy and really what you're building for yourself. It's sort of like how you are scaling that foundation and all of the things that you're bringing into your life as it relates to the reputation that you want to be cultivating. And that for you had started last year as well. So both of you are going through this big Saturn and Pisces, I suppose, glow ups, if you will.
I like that. Glow up.
Where it's an opportunity to figure out who you are and how you want to be known and how you want to be seen and how you want to be remembered. And compiling all of those things to have the confidence to be able to arrive for it. And that's really what Saturn and Pisces in that journey has been for both of you in different but very compatible ways.
That's super interesting. Because last year is when Brian and I started family planning and trying to get pregnant. And one of the things that had been really top of mind to me was trying to figure out like what parts of me I didn't want to bring into being a mother and the things that I needed to work on and how I wanted to show up in this like new form. But that's kind of related to being a mom. So is this supposed to be more career?
It's career, but I would say that, it's interesting, and not to get too technical, but the 10th house is the response to the 4th house, and the 4th house has a lot to do with the foundation that we are building, our home. And mothering and your childhood and what it means to be expanding on your childhood, what worked and what didn't work. So the 10th house, which is, oftentimes sort of glossed over as like the career house, if we are doing that one right, things that we want in our lifetime are the byproduct of the things we had or didn't have when we were kids,
Right.
And building on that and expanding on that gives us so much insight as to what we really ought to be doing with our life and what is meant for our soul and what is meant to leave behind.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, wow.
I love that.
I know.
At this point in the game, at this point in my understanding and my interpretation of charts, I really see these charts as the soul of someone.
Yeah.
And the soul wanting and needing to express itself in this exact format, in this moment, as it appeared in the sky. And I think that every single thing that we have in our chart is there to support us and is there to enable us to become the most actualized version of who we are, which include the challenging things that we have. Those are there because we are meant to have them.
Right.
And oftentimes people will be like, but why am I still going, like, why do I still have these same themes appearing over and over again? I thought that I got over it. I thought that I healed it. I thought I grew out of it. And it's like, no, those are the themes you are supposed to experience throughout your entire life. It's not a matter of like getting over it or doing the work or not.
It's not like one and done.
Exactly. It's like, no, that's for you forever. That's for you for this lifetime.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Which can feel a bit intimidating.
Yeah.
For sure.
For sure. I'm saying it casually and it's like, so
it's
like
frustrating,
it's really shocking.
This feels like pulling the death card.
I mean, it makes me think of the conversation of kind of breaking generational trauma and like almost like the universe is setting you up to learn a lesson that perhaps like either in a past life or your family has not learned yet, and you're setting a new path to move forward.
Yes, that's exactly how I see it too.
Yeah.
And family charts are incredibly interesting. Something that I think, let me see if either of you have this. No, so neither of you have personal planets that are retrograde in your chart. So neither of you were born during a Mercury retrograde, a Venus retrograde, or a Mars retrograde. But for your listeners who were, I find that those personal planet retrogrades often indicate something in generationally that someone was not able to fully express. So if someone was born during a Mercury retrograde, it could be that a parent of theirs or a grandparent couldn't adequately communicate, right? They for whatever reason, they weren't able to really fully express themselves.
Oh.
And then that shows up in the individual's chart as a retrograde, and it's their journey to sort of really heal and work through that. Or if it's Venus retrograde, it could be about insecurities or values or resources. Or Mars retrograde, it could be that somebody felt very stuck and limited and unable to take action. Someone felt like they were really held back. And it's not necessarily the person who has it in their chart, but it's the line that they come down from.
Ugh, it's so powerful.
Have you looked up your daughter's chart?
Oh, of course.
Yeah, because right now I'm thinking like, oh shit, I need to make sure that I do what I need to for healing anything that's weird coming up in Noah's chart.
I think that I asked what her rising was. I mean, it's such a blur giving birth, but I think that it was within minutes of, I was like, Luke, get the chart, you know? And like, she was on me. It was in the moment that I was holding her. And I asked for Luke to tell me her chart while she was in my arms for the first time.
That's amazing. I love that.
She's here and you have to understand her.
Yeah.
This is the first step.
It was like, what's it going to be? The whole time, it was a very long delivery. And the whole time I was watching the chart move, and I was like, all right, we're not going to be this
Things
moon.
are continuously changing.
Yeah. So yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Oh my gosh.
Have you done Noah's yet? You should do that.
Well, no, but I don't know that I would understand it.
Right.
Well, I
would. Then, Aliza, you can help us.
Don't worry. I know someone who does.
I'm going to say, help me. What do I need to know? Yeah. So one of the things that we noticed when you sent over the charts is that in my chart, the lines are kind of crossing all over the place. And then Sabrina's is really heavy in the top half of that. Does that mean anything at all?
Everything means something.
Okay.
You know, when you're looking at a chart, everything is significant, but not everything is for you at that moment. And let me explain that. I have this sort of philosophy that you know what you need to know when you need to know it. So it's sort of what is appealing and intriguing to you is meant for you in that moment. And what isn't, like you could just as easily ask me, what are these numbers around here? And why do Sabrina and I both have these 26 and 25 degree Geminis in this way? And then that would be interesting for you to know. But you're curious about the aspect lines. So that means that that's important for you right now. The aspect lines have to do with the relationships between the different planets. So in the center of these charts, there's lots of different lines going in lots of different directions. And the aspect lines sort of show patterns, show where energy is being concentrated, show what the dynamics are. So in Sabrina's chart, we have a lot that's in the top half, in the top hemisphere of her chart, and also on the Western hemisphere, on the other side, on the right, if I'm looking at it. So most of the aspect lines are connecting the planets in that region. Whereas in your chart, they're kind of all over the place. And what you'll notice is that your chart is much more spread out. It's fanned out. So you have planets in lots of different houses. So you don't have that same sort of concentration of planets in different houses where what we would call them are stelliums, where it's sort of like all the energy is like boiling up in these areas. When you have a stellium, it's very like feast or famine when you have a stellium, because it really means that like when things are really good for that stellium, they're really good. And when things are really bad, they're really bad. Whereas with you, with your chart, because it's all splayed out and it's fanned out across the chart, you're going to have, it's not like it's more even keeled. I don't want to say that because I feel like that's a simplification of it, but it just sort of, it's like there's a steadiness to it in your life. There's a steadiness to movement. You'll define a year as like, oh, this was a really good year, or this wasn't as good of a year. But with a stellium, it's like I had a great October or I had a shitty October. You know, it's like month by month.
It's so spot on.
So yes, that is one of the differences.
That was crazy. Oh my God.
Yeah. The energy is compounding differently.
Yeah.
It's more spread out for you.
That totally makes sense.
Were there things that stuck out to you about our charts individually and then also reading them side by side? Was there anything compatibility between Corinne and I?
Should we quit the podcast?
Yeah, should we give up
horrible
on
business
so
partners
quit
and friends?
the podcast.
Stop being friends.
Yeah.
So you're not compatible. Sorry to say.
The last 7 years or 13 years of our life have been a lie.
It's been a lie.
Well, that's always a funny thing because that is something that I feel is one of the misconceptions around astrology is astrology doesn't indicate whether or not people are compatible. It's how they are compatible, right? If a couple has been together or friends have been together for years and then they come and it's like, are we compatible? It's like, you know you're compatible.
Yeah, obviously
like,
you are. Yeah.
You are in a relationship. You're you're best friends. You have a business together, whatever it is. But what we can see is how it works, right? And what the strengths are, rather than it feel like something where we have to qualify whether or not it, exists.
Yeah.
We know it
It's not a do or die.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
we get it.
It's doing. Yeah.
It is. It's already doing.
Or are we dying together?
Always with every breath.
So cute.
We're all actively dying in this room right now.
Yes, we are. We're decaying.
Yay.
The beauty of life.
Corinne, did you know you were born during a full moon?
I did know that because my mom likes all the witchiness. And so she always reminds me a Tuesday on a full moon.
Oh, cool.
I love it.
What else do you know about that?
That's about it.
I was going to say, how do you metabolize that? Or how do you feel about full moons? Like, do you feel connected to them?
I definitely do. I always feel very different. Like I can pretty much tell when there's going to be a full moon without tracking it at all. Because I think my body responds to it. And my mom oddly does too. And I know a lot of people feel something when the full moon is happening, but there's a part of me that's very restless. And if I spot a full moon like out the window, I can't fall asleep. I basically just have to moon gaze and stare at it for like hours, which
you lock eyes with the moon.
I'm in a relationship with the moon, I think.
It's complicated.
It's complicated. Yeah.
Being born during a full moon is it's a notable thing because the chart that you're born under is sort of a snapshot of what what your soul wants and how your soul wants to express itself in this life. And full moons are all about exposure, illumination, revelations. And as a Leo with an Aquarius moon, you're on this axis of figuring out what creativity means to you, what your sort of product is supposed to be, and then who it's for, right? The sun wants to shine in Leo and it wants to sort of be at the center of things. And I can say this as a fellow Leo. But in the moon in Aquarius is very much like thinking about the greater good, humanity, who's benefiting. How is this going to be something that really moves the needle and makes a difference? When is just being at the center of it not enough, right? And balancing and navigating those, I mean, frankly, doing what you're doing is such a great manifestation of the full moon in Aquarius because you have a microphone in your hand, which is very important for a Leo, but then you're also helping people, right? And podcasting, people listen to podcasts because they have an experience from it, right? They're learning, they're connecting, they're forming a community. or just recognizing that they're not as alone in their hobbies or their interests or their ways of seeing the world, and that they're understood, right? And that is very much what the moon in Aquarius is all about. It wants to make a really significant difference.
Yeah.
So I think that this is such a great manifestation of that for you.
That's very interesting. Yeah. Because I feel like in terms of Leo, I've always felt very connected to Leo in terms of like the having a lot of pride. But when it comes to sort of the stereotypical like big ego, busting in the room, all eyes on me, I've never felt connected to that. And yet when I'm in a group setting, I find myself kind of being almost like the conductor socially and kind of can naturally fall into that place. But I also feel so uncomfortable having to be put on the spot to be that. So I felt kind of like at odds sometimes with, I guess, like being a Leo and like who I am. So it is kind of interesting to see kind of how that is sort of connecting, where it's like a mixture of everything.
I agree with you. I mean, that was my experience as well. I'm a Leo sun with a Pisces moon. So even though there are certain qualities of me that are undeniably very Leo, for me, my internal experience, which is the moon in Pisces, was also like I would never take the spotlight and make someone else feel uncomfortable around it. I always would rather other people sort of have their experience. I don't want to try to step on any toes. I want to always be conscientious about how I'm expressing myself and making sure people feel good. And so similarly, it was not the typical sort of stereotype of the Leo sun experience, which then gave me insight as to why astrology is super cool, is because you can have multiple truths simultaneously. And being born during the Aquarius full moon as a Leo gives you so much perspective as to, yes, it's like, you know, it's the energy. It's very much the energy of like, if no one is raising their hand in the class, I'm going to raise my hand because I don't want to make the teacher uncomfortable. Like I'm going to take one for the team.
Yeah. And I give it like 3 beats and then I step in.
And then people might misinterpret that as like, oh, there she is raising her hand again. Yeah. But you're like, but nobody, if someone else wanted to raise their hand, I would have loved it, you know? Right. So it's that is a perfect sort of example of it.
To the T, I feel.
Yeah.
Exactly what ends up happening.
Right. Because you're trying to do something for the greater good, but oftentimes you are the one who has to then be like, I'll get myself out there and start the conversation.
Here I go again. Anyone see dead people? Like, this is a wedding. I
don't know. This is a Wendy's. So yeah, that really stands out to me in your chart. And then, of course, because you were born so close together, I mean, you're just a few weeks apart. There are so many similarities as it relates to the outer planets and the timing and the Saturn return timing, the timing of different important astrological things that are happening. So you're like twins, you know, you're like sister twins, the shining twins.
We're sister twins.
We're sister
Mama
witches,
and Papa.
Sister wives.
Mama, Papa, baby.
Yeah. Mama, baby.
Well,
Mama,
maybe that's
baby.
part of why you can go through the different roles together too.
Yeah.
And you can oscillate, is because when you find your little twin, you can experiment with like, okay, who's mommy, who's daddy, who's baby, who's grandpa?
Yeah. Actually, you know, it's interesting you say that, because one thing you and I have always reflected on in our relationship is that we do go through these waves where one of us kind of has to like take on more work or take on a little bit more responsibility in our relationship because the other is going through things. And it's always kind of been that symbiotic relationship where we can do that. And
it's almost
we balance
unspoken.
each other out. Yeah,
we never talk
really
about it, but we just know that we're passing the baton back and forth.
Yeah.
Right now, she is to support me.
Yeah.
She's holding
I'm
the
mommy
torch.
right now.
She's
You're
mama
baby.
and I'm baby right now.
So cute.
Yeah.
So
but
cute.
like, we know that. And I've never had to say, hey, I have to be baby. You have to be mama.
Yeah.
She just knows that she's mama.
If there ever comes to be a moment where you're not sure what the roles are, you can also discuss them too.
Absolutely.
You could just say, you know, I'm mommy, daddy, baby.
Who am I today?
And you'll probably all be in agreement with it, but it's also good. It's a good way to check in.
Yeah. We should have like a little chart and put like a sticker. Sabrina is baby today.
Yeah.
Corinne is mama.
Or like an open close sign, but it's like we have to, like, when we walk in the room, we have to put on which one we need to be.
Yeah, I'm baby.
I already claimed baby today.
I love it.
I love it.
I'll be your weird
I feel like you're
I'm your uncle.
Uncle, I love it.
So Sabrina, something that I noticed in your chart is that you have a really cool little stellium between your Chiron, your Mercury, and your Sun. Now, do you know about any of those planets? Okay, cool.
Absolutely not.
So starting with the most obvious, which is your Sun in Virgo, the Sun represents it shows how we move through our world. The Sun shines, so wherever it is in our chart is sort of like, oh, that's your day-to-day experience, right?
Okay.
This is like the synthesis of how your chart, if you only could work with one thing, this is how your chart is going to move through the world and move through life. So your Sun in Virgo is moving through life with a lot of awareness, right? A lot of insight, sensitivity, wanting to really be meticulous about your experience. It's connected to Mercury, which is also the ruler of Virgo. So excellent communication. Corinne, you also are an excellent communicator. Gemini is your rising sign, which is also ruled by Mercury. So definitely, again, another affirmation that you guys are doing the right thing in podcasting, because communication comes very easily to both of you. So you have the Sun and Mercury together in your chart. But just before that, you have Chiron at 28 degrees of Leo. And Chiron is the wounded healer. It's a comet. And I think it's really interesting that at the beginning of this conversation, you were talking about your trauma, your healing journey, because yes, that is a huge part of what you are meant to be communicating and expressing. It's the wounds around perhaps even who you are, what you can say, what you can't say, what is private information, what's public information is a major part of the themes around your life.
That is the most spot on.
With that, I think that it's something that you are going to see over and over again throughout your life, is figuring out with your personal journey as it relates to your wounds and your healing, what is meant for you and what is meant to be shared.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a huge part of my life. I mean, especially right now.
And it's extremely difficult when your career involves a microphone and sharing aspects of your life that make other people feel curious about all aspects of your life. It's a difficult thing to navigate, especially when it's hard because you want to share things. And so,
of course I do. Yeah.
You allude to a lot, but some things involve other people and it's not appropriate to always.
Right. Or I'm still working through it and figuring out how it relates to my life and how it looks moving forward.
Right.
Well, as a Pisces rising, people are going to project a lot on you.
Oh my God, yeah.
This is a big part of your experience.
Yeah.
In modern astrology, we would say that Neptune is the ruler of Pisces. Neptune is illusion, delusion, it's fantasy. It's a really ethereal and sort of mermaid-like energy where people can sort of assume a lot about you. People will also dump a lot on you. Probably it's one of those things where it's like people start like trying to trauma bond with you instantly.
Yeah.
Which is really evocative. You know, it's really wonderful to have that because it creates an allure.
Yeah.
But it also then makes it difficult and scary for you to be like, actually, that's not me.
Right.
Like your ideas and your perception about me isn't me, but then you're like, but is it me? Is people projecting on me?
But like not all of
is it me? Am I the problem?
Yeah. And that's a really interesting existential question about all of this. You know, if a tree falls in the forest type of thing, like if our charts don't express themselves by way of being perceived by others, are they really doing the work of the chart ever at all? You know?
Wow.
Do we need external variables to activate the things within us? And I would argue that we do.
Right. It's kind of this idea of like you're born with some version of your personality, but then it's your life experiences that either alter it or enhance it.
Nature versus nurture.
Yeah.
Yes. And this is the argument that I make for twins, right? Who would have very, very similar birth charts. You know, twins born within minutes of each other might have nearly identical charts.
Yeah.
But the minute that these two different people come out with their identical charts, the world is treating each person differently.
Right.
Which is is there a twin that needed more support when they were born? Is there a twin that was really pretty and the other one was not so much?
Right.
Like that feedback is informing the way that the chart is going to express itself, the way it's going to manifest. And then you have these two identical charts that live different lives from the minute that they come into the world.
See, that's so wild because my dad is a twin and he and his brother are so different. Like there's plenty of aspects of their personalities, like socially and kind of the way that they communicate that can be similar. But in terms of how they live their lives and just how they appear and present themselves, it's very, very different.
Yeah.
Because the chart needs to be sort of evoked, you know?
Fed life experience.
Yeah.
Yes.
Wow.
So fascinating.
Yes.
Okay, so these are birth charts, but I'm so curious. Have you ever looked up charts that have to do with specific events, like when the Mothman was first spotted or when Britney Spears was emancipated?
With Morbid?
Yeah.
The Salem witch trials?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was recently on Morbid and we did an extensive deep dive into the Salem witch trials. We looked at, I think, like 60 charts. I actually still have them in my backpack.
Oh my gosh.
And we could bust them out for this one too.
Part two.
Just come every time I come to Massachusetts, I bring 60 Salem witch trial charts with me. But yeah, it was really, really fascinating to look at them. And it's really delightful for me because I am truly quite the nerd, right? And applying astrology to interesting historic things to see what was going on is
so
really
cool.
riveting. But I also can do this with contemporary current events. You know, I remember when during Kavanaugh's trials a few years ago, the astrology was really literal. I think we had some really interesting Scorpio placements and Venusian placements that had a lot to do with women being heard, women not being heard.
Interesting.
Just really fascinating manifestations of the archetypes.
Wow. Has there been a specific event or like maybe a specific celebrity where you kind of obsess over that chart?
That's a good question. I've gone through phases at different times of different charts that I thought were really interesting. I mean, I thought that J-Lo and Ben Affleck were really interesting and the timing of their charts.
Yeah.
And
that's cool.
Because the first time they were together, they were on the same nodal axis. The eclipses were in the same point as where they were when they got back together. So that was something that I thought was very interesting.
Spooky.
Yeah, it was because it's a 19-year cycle.
Yeah.
So it was a long cycle that they had to come back around through.
I mean, it kind of reminds me of like the invisible string theory a bit where you've crossed paths with someone, but you don't really get brought into each other's lives for X amount of time because you weren't meant to be in each other's lives until then.
Yes. I mean, that's also a huge part of astrology. And when we talk about compatibility, we have charts, but we also have timing. And sometimes people will be like, oh, you know, how does the compatibility look in the charts? And it can look amazing. It can look so matched. But if one person is going through their Saturn return, another person is going through their Jupiter return or some other square that's happening, it might simply not be the right time for these people to come together. Or even something smaller. You know, in the past couple of years, Sabrina, with Saturn going through your 12th house, like this has been a difficult time for you, right? Yeah. And during that difficult time, it wouldn't necessarily be the best time for some big life-altering thing to happen during that time because you're like, I'm in a weird place right now.
Yeah.
But as soon as Saturn gets out of that, you're going to be out of that weird place. And then you're going to feel much better about introducing different storylines into your life.
So what does our 2025 look like?
Well, ladies, I did pull out some sheets here on what to expect for 2025.
Ooh, okay.
Oh, I'm excited.
2025 is so intense.
In a good way?
Oh,
I don't know.
Okay. Just intense.
Okay.
I'm
clutching my pearls.
I don't want to qualify it yet.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. I love how we just had a whole conversation about the death card and then I immediately go, in a good way?
In a good way. No. I'll look back and be like, 2025 was this. And you'll be like, my January was this. My February was this. Because if we've learned anything, that's the way it goes.
So we start the year with a Mars retrograde. Then we have a Venus retrograde. Venus retrograde corresponds with Mercury retrograde. We have 3 Mercury retrogrades in 2025. We have 4 eclipses. That's pretty normal. But the main things that are happening in 2025 is that we have very big planets, very far away planets moving into new zodiac signs for the first time in a very long time.
Okay.
And these are called ingresses, an entrance.
Okay.
And ingresses in astrology, if the planet is very far away and it doesn't happen very often, represent new eras, new cultural shifts, big moments that are taking place. And we have a lot of them happening next year.
Wow.
And when we have a lot of ingresses, it means that there's a lot of new chapters that are beginning.
So that's kind of globally, like 2025, big picture, not just individually for us.
This is for everyone. Yes.
Okay.
For some reason, my mind immediately went to like U.S. government overthrown, aliens take over. What are all the hugest
easy.
things?
I know
exactly.
Moving to Mars.
I understand that maybe we don't know if it's good or bad yet.
I was thinking about this in anticipation of being on the show with you guys. What is the ethical way of talking about these ingresses? Because they're so clickbaity.
Yeah.
They're so clickbaity. And we're going to see a lot of astrologers next year really leaning into the fear around it. And I was already accused of fear mongering because I said 2025 is going to be crazy. And literally in the second sentence, I said, neither good nor bad.
But
in
people
that
stopped
initial,
before that?
yes,
Yeah.
and it was like fear mongering. How could you say this? I'm like, you didn't even watch 3 seconds of the
more.
video.
Yeah.
Right? Like you can't say that. This is just, that is how I would phrase it. It is crazy. These are really important, significant things. These are crazy. I don't know if they are good or bad. And what is good or bad? That is so boring.
Yeah. And it's also individualized to a personal experience.
Well, and I guess to your point, saying that's so boring, now we know 2025 will not be boring.
It won't be boring.
That's a great way to put it.
I do anticipate that astrology is going to have a huge year next year with all of these going on.
Okay.
Because there's just going to be there's a lot to talk about. So I want to just mention a few of the things that are happening. Neptune, which is, we had just briefly talked about, which is the planet of illusion and delusion, is going to be changing signs, moving into Aries for the first time since the 1800s.
Oh my gosh.
And it's changing signs for the first time since 2011. So this is ending an era for all of us that started in 2011. One of the things that I think is really interesting about that is that really was the beginning of social media. It was 2011. That's what we attribute to, that was when like Instagram
the first
started.
Instagram filters. We're taking a picture of our like burger.
Yes.
Yep.
And it's when we shifted from social networking, Facebook, to social media influencers, shifting our entire lives online rather than as the extension of what our in real life was.
Yeah. Right.
And that was a really big transition. So that's very fascinating to me, right? What is going to happen to our social media platforms? What is going to happen to our relationships with influencers, with technology, with the way that we are relating and showing up with AI? Yes.
I know that it's going to go further, obviously, and deeper than what it is, but there's part of me that just wishes so badly that everything would crash and we can just like go back to a much more simpler
to like an 1800s.
way of living. Let's go back to the 1800s. I'll trade you my eggs for your cucumbers.
Yeah.
Like, let's do that again.
It sounds like a great barter.
It does, right?
You just want to live on a commune.
I do.
Maybe that's for you.
Yeah. Unless AI robots take over.
I do think that AI is going to, there's no stopping it. And I think that it is just going to become more and more part of our experience, not because I wanted to, but because of the astrology.
Yeah.
The astrology says, that's it, honey. Like it really is.
How interesting.
It cannot be put back into the Pandora box.
Right.
It has been unleashed.
It's unleashed. Yeah.
Uranus is moving into Gemini next year as well.
Mm-hmm.
This is also, it hasn't been in Gemini in 84 years. So this is it's been a very long time since we've seen this energy transit.
Wow.
It's coming out of Taurus, which it's where it's been for the past 7 years. And during that time, Uranus and Taurus, I really think has changed our relationship. I mean, for me, the loudest thing is that it's made the climate crisis very literal. It's no one is denying. Yeah. And that Uranus is what is shocking, unexpected things, and Taurus has to do with the physical world. So it's been sort of like, and also the economy. And obviously it's been wild with the economy,
global
right?
pandemic. Yeah, we're just still starting to recover from some of that.
Yes. Yeah. It's the economy, it's the land, it's even land back movements, right? Is very Uranus in Taurus and the conversation moving towards those. And when Uranus goes into Gemini, which is very curious, it's very mercurial, it's very fast, it's very interested in things, it's an air sign. I would imagine that there's going to be major movements around new technologies. Big movements around them, which is exciting and also,
right,
curious, right?
I mean,
what is it going to be?
With social media, like there are a lot of positives to it and then like the way it's connected to us to the world, but there's also some negatives to it. And I think that's
well, I'm trying to think of too, like connecting it to my personal chart where you were talking about how I'm in the phase of kind of defining who I am career-wise. I feel like the people who were kind of at the precipice of the social media movement really defined themselves in a really great way and set themselves up early. So maybe this is kind of like a hint to us to try to figure out ways to, whatever direction this new technology goes, how do we best utilize it with our career?
Yes. I mean, I think that if we have learned anything over the years, it's to really experiment and to be willing to experiment. And even if it feels cringe and ick and all of the things, like it's worth taking the risk and just seeing what could be.
Yeah. Starting a podcast was cringe at first. Like we go back and listen to episode 1 and we're like,
no, thank you.
But we stuck with it. Yeah.
I mean, you have to be cringe in order to do anything.
Yeah.
And a little delusional too, because there was some delusion with us where we didn't think, we truly were like, oh, this is basically like a diary.
Yeah.
And we didn't think anyone would listen. And then when we realized people were listening, we're like, oh God. And we're like, well, why didn't we think people would listen? Like we're publicly
we're putting it out there in the world.
Yeah. So rocky start. But here we are. We have a bookshelf now.
With a bookshelf.
Look at how far we've come.
So for you guys, whenever we talk about so all of those things are going to affect us, right?
Yeah.
Like there's so many things. What does next year look like? It looks like all of your charts being activated across the board in lots of different ways. But I would say that holistically, when we talk about what does a year look like, right? What are the main themes? We're going to look at the planet Jupiter because Jupiter spends a year in a zodiac sign. So it really sort of defines what that time period in our life is going to be.
Interesting. Okay.
And it definitely defines and sets culture. Currently, we have Jupiter in Gemini. And as I have been going around and talking about, it's very brat. Jupiter moved into Gemini at the end of May. Literally, Charlie XCX's album came out 2 weeks later.
Oh my gosh.
And it was such a shift from Jupiter in Taurus, which was we had last year and was very Barbie, right? Very sort of traditional, old-fashioned femininity.
Yeah.
I mean, I was surprised that Barbie did as well as it did because I was like, this is so not edgy. Like this is like so vanilla, right?
Yeah.
And then moving into Jupiter in Gemini, which is so much more in your face and so much more sort of like loud and
brat summer,
right? Jupiter in Gemini. So that was really interesting to see. I've been thinking a lot, okay, if we know that Jupiter sets the zeitgeist, then how could we anticipate it, right? What would be coming next? Next year, we're going to have Jupiter moving into Cancer. That's going to be in June of next year, June 9th. Jupiter goes into Cancer.
Okay.
Cancer is it's a water sign. It's very intuitive. It's very sensitive. It's very Lana. So I would say that those could be some of the themes that we might see in the broader culture for next year.
Okay.
Moving out of the brat summer and maybe into like, I don't know, crying summer.
I like that.
Teardrop summer.
And sensitive. Like
Lana,
it feels like,
Billy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
My whole Spotify recommended playlist.
It's sad girl summer.
Playlist.
It's sad girl.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it also, I mean, there's a tenderness to it. There's a rawness, a vulnerability. So I think that those will be some of the main themes we see moving into the collective consciousness next year.
Wow.
Is that sort of sensitive edge.
I like that. I mean,
we'll all cry as AI takes our jobs.
I think that it will be interesting to see, especially with some of these other planets moving into Aries, Neptune moving into Aries, and Saturn moving into Aries, which is so not sad girl. It's so warrior. It's so fierce. It's so intense. It's so aggressive.
Right.
It's going to be an interesting counterbalance. In astrology, we would call it a square. It's an interesting square that's going to be formed to Jupiter.
I mean, I've always said, and I feel like everyone in this room can agree with it, but there is something so warrior about sensitivity.
Yes.
So those do kind of go hand in hand with each other.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
So for where are these things going to be activating your chart? So Corinne, it's interesting because Jupiter is actually in your 12th house right now, and it's going to be moving into your first house next year in 2025. And this, again, it's a similarity that you guys have. Saturn has been in your 12th. Jupiter is currently in your 12th. That's a much faster transit, so it hasn't been in there for that long. I would say that this very much defines your pregnancy and early days of motherhood for you. And figuring out, like, what does it mean to be home? What does it mean to have these new responsibilities, to feel a little isolated, to feel a little internal, to feel like...
To also have a child with F-pies.
Yes.
Here we go.
Leos with F-pies babies. So cute. That summer. So, yeah, I mean, very psychological too.
Yeah.
But when that moves out, it's going to be moving into your first house. And I would say that coming in June, the anticipation for that, I would say, is very fortunate, very auspicious. I would not be surprised if a new project came through at that time for you that's really meaningful and big. And it's something that is sort of all of the no's and all of the time indoors and all of the time sort of internally processing is going to be like, oh yeah, that's why I had to do that, is because this is here now. And then Sabrina, for you, that shift is going to be in your 4th house. So around the same time for you, there's been a lot of focus on a Jupiterian level around like community, who are my friends, who are my people. And then come May into Jupiter moving into Cancer, into your 4th house, it's like there's a feeling of groundedness, of solidity. For some reason, I keep thinking about like relationships and marriage and partnership and all of those things around this for you. It's actually not like the traditional way of interpreting it, but that's also psychic.
Yeah, that's what's coming to you.
Yeah, it is what's coming to me. And sort of rooting yourself, grounding yourself, and feeling more in alignment with where you're supposed to be. And I think that that's going to feel really cathartic for you.
That sounds like it will feel cathartic.
Yeah. Is there a way to know kind of like what month or what quarter that is sort of coming for Sabrina?
For both of you, it's end of May into June.
May and June. Okay.
Yeah. I like how you're asking that for me, because you want to know for you to know when you're going to come to my door with balloons.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. But that's different than what you were saying earlier of Saturn.
Yeah, which is imminent.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there something like an exercise or a cleansing or some sort of mental ritual that people can do in preparation to move into another calendar year?
I am I'm a witch. I don't know if I mentioned that. So I'm always thinking of portals, and I'm always thinking about like, what's a threshold I can move through and I can help people move through. And I think anything is a portal and a threshold if you want it to be.
Right.
You know, this calendar, the astrology cycles work with a different calendar. A new year starts with Aries season, the vernal equinox, which occurs at the end of March. However, each chart has its own calendar that it operates on. According to this, your birthday is mid-March, and according to this, your birthday is mid-June, because that's when your charts reset. So your personal birthday, based on your Gemini rising, your chart actually resets in the middle of June. Your chart actually resets in the middle of March.
Interesting.
Yes.
Does that like show up in life in a certain way? Like, do people like, would I feel a certain way on that day? Or
yes.
that time?
I have found that usually leading up to it, we're going to feel sort of the strongest sense of frustration or concern about, what's coming for me, what's next, what should there's sort of this anticipatory energy. And then when the sun crosses your ascendant, which is that really notable, gesture that happens in astrology, it's sort of like it's the beginning of a new story. It's the beginning of a new cycle.
Is there an exact
chart's birthday
date?
Yes, it changes a little bit every year because a chart is 360 degrees and a calendar year is 365 days. So there's a little bit of a variable, but it's always on or around a certain day.
Interesting.
So a cleansing ritual for going into anything.
That's what you asked.
I would say that there's a few different things that you can do, right? Like it depends on how ritualistic you want to get. One of my favorite rituals is sort of assigning a jar or a vase or any sort of vessel to be what you want to release and keeping that near where you move through often. And on a piece of paper, as something comes into your consciousness that you want to let go of, putting that into the vessel and just sort of allowing that vessel to do the work to release it for you. That's a really good cleansing ritual. You can also do the same thing for manifesting, right?
Yeah.
If you want to bring new things into your life, you can assign a jar or a vessel as a place where things brew. So you can write on a piece of paper what you want to bring in. And a big part of the point of this is that you're not the one moving every day through like, I need to let go of this. I need to let go of this. Or I need to bring this in. I need it. I need it. And it's like, actually, I'm going to stop obsessing around it. I'm going to let the universe, I'm going to let the divine forces, I'm going to let God or the angels or whatever it is take care of it and do the work so that I can keep living my life.
Right.
Yeah.
Because fundamentally what we want to do, ironically, with all of this prediction is be present, you know, be as present as possible, or else we are at such a detriment when it comes to our spirituality.
Right.
I also selfishly love that you just gave that suggestion because not knowing much about rituals, a couple of years ago, I had a New Year's party and I set up a bowl for intention setting with water, and I got this dissolvable paper and had people just like write down whatever they want and stir it into the bowl, and it would like disappear.
That's beautiful.
Really cool.
And I was just like, oh,
An
I think that
intuitive witch.
this is a fun little thing to do. And ever since I've like thought like, oh, I have to do that every year. And I didn't really realize it was an actual ritual.
Well, it reminds me of our conversation with Theo. They had told us, because Corinne and I call ourselves baby witches because we feel like frauds calling ourselves actual witches. But
why?
I think
because
we're
because we're
getting more
through the
comfortable.
imposter syndrome of trusting ourselves and our
and we're working our way through it. But I think something like that and a lot of our previous experiences have shown that we have had intuitive witchiness in our whole lives and throughout our whole lives. And now we're actively nurturing that.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that all women are witches.
Yeah, totally.
I agree with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's just a matter of figuring out what kind of witch you are. You know, how does that express through you?
Right.
Maybe all people are witches, you know, like everyone is magical.
Yeah.
Everyone has intuition. Everyone has their own rhythm.
We're all energy. Yeah.
We are. And everyone has a heartbeat, right? If you're here and if you are alive, then you have your own energy and rhythm and motion and magic that you can work with. And I think anything that brings us back to that is the right thing to do.
I love that. That's a nice sentiment.
Beautiful.
We are all magic. We are all witches.
I feel like that's a great note to end on too.
Yeah.
It's very uplifting.
Good.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for doing this and joining us. When you went to the bathroom, Corinne and I were like, okay, what else can we have Aliza do charts for?
Yeah, we were like, you have to come on again.
Yeah.
I would love to. It would be an honor. Any excuse to come back to Massachusetts.
Absolutely.
And be witchy with you guys.
Yes, please.
With my real non-baby witches, my full adult daddy witches, mommy witches, baby witches.
Grandma witch.
Yes, grandma witch, uncle witch.
Uncle witch. We're all uncle witches here.
Uncle witch.
Can you tell our listeners where to find you on socials and the world, the universe?
I'm all over the world. I'm out there at Aliza Kelly, Aliza Kelly, everywhere. And then I have my show, Horoscope Weekly, that comes out every Monday. And it's a dream. I love it. It's a great show.
Yeah.
And we do lots and lots of very interesting astrology and figure out what each week actually means and how to metabolize and work with the energies. And then my book, It's All Magic, is also out now because it's December.
Do you want to hold it so that you can... There we go. There's the shot.
Beautiful.
Glamour shot. So yes, It's All Magic is out now. So check it out if you want this and more.
Amazing.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
This was such a treat. We will see you on the other side.